All right. Craig Challen, thank you so much for speaking to me and to being involved with StyleCon X Melbourne 2022. We're really looking forward to the event and to having you there. Um, People, of course, know you because of the Thai 2019 cave rescue and everything that I guess followed from that in terms of decorations, including Australian of the Year. But I want to start by asking about your background because people will probably know less about that. But from reading various things you've written, I can see that it's a very important part of who you are and in understanding your story. So, where did you grow up, and what do you think was decisive in making you who you are in terms of your upbringing?
Yeah, well, my immediate reaction to that is I had a pretty ordinary Australian background. So I was born in 1965 and lived my young childhood in the suburbs of Perth. And then one of the decisive moments in my life probably was during my childhood. We moved out to a rural property, and that certainly opened up a lot of adventures to me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, that was certainly a formative experience. I was away from all my mates, had to learn to be a bit self-reliant, and I'd just disappear for a lot of time into the bush and hang out with myself, and learnt a lot about my capabilities and how to get by. But really, if I had to pick an underlying theme, I just think my story is one of extraordinary good fortune and luck. I think being born at the time and place in history that I was, you could make a pretty arguable case that that is the best time in human history to have ever been born. Australia arguably one of the if not the best place in the world. It's pretty hard to make a list of better places. And I think we're at this crux where I certainly wasn't from a privileged or well-off background, but things were okay. We weren't certainly weren't in want, and I had this broad range of experiences to me. I was extremely fortunate that I had great family life and parents, and that they instilled a work ethic into me and a sense of responsibility, and probably most of all, an attitude of having an inquiring mind and just finding out as much as you can about the world. I don't, hopefully that doesn't all sound a little bit grandiose, but there we were. And so then I went through my school, decided to be a vet, partly because of coming from a rural background, and partly because it'd mean I got to work in the outdoors and do my thing, use practical skills. I've always liked to do things with my hands, and of course there was certainly just an assumption in our family. I don't remember it ever being discussed that all of us kids would go into a professional environment. And one thing led to another. The Being in the vet business for a while led to a business career, which is a great learning experience, being in charge of people, trying to pull a lot of strings, deal with complex situations, and learn about yourself, and about learning to take responsibility. And so I went through that. I was fortunate that in the end, I built a pretty successful business, and along the way, picked up this unusual hobby of cave diving and exploration, and being an adventurer a bit more
So,
broadly.
yeah, that was my next question. To get you to just talk a little bit about that, because there are a lot of us out there who might think that diving into confined spaces in the dark, filled with water, is not high on our list of leisure activities. But it seems as though it was instantly appealing to you.
Yeah, well, I'd always been into adventure sports of one kind or another. Wasn't Well, I wasn't talented enough really to be on the football field or the cricket field. Bit of a problem with that throwing and catching. Wasn't as good as all the other kids, but I was more inclined towards solo activities and dialing a bit of risk in there. And so I drifted through a few things, all the normal stuff, rock climbing and parachuting and all of that. A lot of those things, I was a student, so I didn't have any money, so I couldn't pursue some of the stuff that I wanted to do. And then a little bit later on, I did scuba diving, just open water scuba diving as part of that process. And that was all right. I certainly took to having my head underwater. I thought that was pretty cool. But I'd never heard about cave diving like most people probably until the Thai Cave Rescue. And I just happened to meet someone that was an instructor and was doing a fair bit of this. And so I did a couple of the courses. You go through a series of courses to build your skills and give you enough knowledge to be dangerous. And he must have seen something in me, I guess, because at a very early stage I was invited in an expedition to Vanuatu to explore some new caves.
Wow.
And that just blew me away. I was still pretty I was going to say wet behind the ears, I suppose, both figuratively and literally in cave diving. But to get the opportunity to go somewhere that nobody has ever been before and see things that have never had human eyes laid upon them, that was way cool. I just never really got over the excitement of that, and since then I've had the opportunity to go all around the world exploring caves and having fun, and it's been a pretty awesome ride.
So tell me a little bit about that ride. I mean, there's always the possibility that something can go wrong, I guess. We're talking about Stoicism, we will be shortly. Stoics talk a lot about, I guess, handling negative emotions, including fear and anxiety. Do you have any practices that you use and that you might have used in situations where things might go wrong, or in those moments where fear might emerge as a possible response? Do you have any practices or even tips for people as to how you handle that?
In the context of cave diving, I actually find that a bit of a difficult question to answer these days, because I've now been doing it for 25 years. And so for me, it's completely a normal operating environment, and people don't really get it, but I am completely at home with it. And it's
wow.
It's hard to understand. I accept that for people that are on the outside of it, because it's an unfamiliar environment. I mean, I'm lucky that I accept that for most people, confined spaces are a bit of a difficult thing to get their head around. I was actually never affected by that, and that's not because I'm particularly brave person. Maybe it's a gene deletion that's occurred somewhere along the line or something like that. But I was always very comfortable being in the dark and in confined spaces. And one of my mates actually puts it, I can't put it any better than him. He says, when you're in that spot, it's just like the cave's giving you a little cuddle. And so I really took to it. But there's no doubt, when I was young and just starting out in this cave diving lark, I did get myself into a couple of spots. There's one that really sticks in my mind, where I was in a cave out in the Nullarbor and trying to get through a small restriction in the cave, which I had no business attempting. It was too small for me, and I got really stuck, just jammed in there. And
Yeah.
it's, they talk about just this rising fear in you, that starts at your toes and just works its way up your body. And you know that if it gets to your neck, then it's all over for you. So you'd better stop it. And you've just got to, relax and take stock. They always say you count backwards from 10 and don't think about anything else. Just wait till you get to 1 and then attack the problem again. And that's what you have to do. I mean, it is. I accept that it's a pretty unforgiving environment. Trying to breathe water has a 100% failure rate. You're best to just keep breathing gas. So when it runs out, that's really bad. But yeah, just accept the situation, fall back on your training, be rational, and you just got to look fear in the eye, and then turn it around and kick its ass. Really. It's I'm very interested in this subject of fear, and I'm a human being. I'm not immune to it, although I'm not really given to admitting it because it's a little bit professionally embarrassing for me. But we can't control fear. That's physiology, right? That's inbuilt with us, or in us. But what we can control is our response to fear. And that is totally within your own control. So you can decide to deal with fear by avoidance, or just panicking and freaking out, or you can decide to confront it and deal with it with rationality and logic. That's the best way to go. Avoidance doesn't help you because at some other stage, fear is going to strike. And this isn't an original idea, but I can't remember where it actually came from. But if you have got fear, then the response to that is, if you haven't got real courage, then deal with it with fake courage. Just pretend that you're brave enough to deal with this situation. And eventually that fake courage, if you exercise it often enough, that becomes real courage. You can train yourself in dealing with fear, just like you can train yourself to run faster.
Yeah, sort of fake it till you make it, and repetition. So let's talk a little bit about about real courage, and move to 2019. I'm hearing from your answers what I think you're going to say, but I'll ask it anyway. Was there ever any hesitation when I believe Dr. Harris got in touch with you? I know you'd been communicating with other divers when the news came out, and over the course of the long extended period in which those kids were in the cave. Well, did you ever have any hesitation about going to Thailand and becoming part of this this rescue attempt, which of course had from the outside perhaps not a great chance of likely success?
Nah, we were both all in. We'd had an interest in cave diving rescue for quite a number of years, and there's a dirty little secret with rescue generally, and that is that everybody that's involved in it is just hanging out for some disaster to happen so they can get involved. And I never really thought in my heart of hearts that I or anybody I knew would be involved in a rescue. And so when the opportunity came up, it actually looked for a while like we weren't going to get a Guernsey there. And I was preparing myself for disappointment. If I'd missed out and somebody else had done it, I would have never gotten over it, I don't reckon. So no, we were all in, couldn't wait.
Okay. All right. Well, so you decide to go, and it doesn't sound like it was something that you had hesitations to get involved in it, and you get there, and what's on the table is something that's never been attempted before, which is that the kids are going to need to be anaesthetised for the journey back. Never been really done before, not even really tested a lot from reading your book as to whether it would even work. And then there is this issue of what might happen if the first kid or the second kid doesn't make it, even from Cave 9 or Chamber 9 to where you were placed, Chamber 8, doing sort of the checkup and making sure things were okay. Talk about that decision making, because I mean, you describe it in the book, and understandably there are all sorts of things that might flood your mind in terms of possibilities. What if one person dies? What if two? When do we stop? Will we be blamed? Are we responsible? And the way that you describe that process and that discussion with your colleague, Dr. Harris or Harry, really resonated for me as somebody who's familiar with Stoic ideas. So can you tell us about those moments, those discussions, and your thinking processes?
Yeah, so you better keep calling him Harry, because every time you say Dr. Harris, I'm wondering who you're talking about.
Okay.
Is all Harry to us. So you know, go back to that situation, and we'd reached the point where there was no doubt in our minds that if these kids stayed in the cave, they were going to die. They were doomed, and there was no way out of there for them. It was expected to be at least 4 or 5 months before this cave dried out and they'd be able to walk out of there. And if one of the ideas that was being floated around the place was that we could get enough supplies in there, enough food and whatever else they'd need, and they could stay in there for that time, for that, you know, 5 months or so. But I think that was implausible. We all pretty much agreed. First of all, I don't think there was enough room in there for 5 months of food, and secondly, and would we be able to get all that in there in the time before the cave went into full flood as well? Because we were waiting for these monsoon rains to arrive in earnest, and
So the cave would have actually filled up more.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So the number I've been given is that at peak flow, there's 80 cubic meters per second of water coming out of this cave, and that's through a fairly narrow passage. So there's no way on this earth that anybody was going in there at that stage. It'd just be physically impossible.
Yeah.
So, and even if we could get enough food in there for them, I think, you know, after 5 months of living underground, they would they'd be getting infections, or the cold would be getting to them. I didn't really think they'd survive. I've never spent, you know, the longest I've spent inside a cave is about 7 days. And that's okay, but you've always got the choice to just wander out if you've had enough of it. You've got other supplies ready and that sort of thing. So the overriding sort of theme of this was these kids are going to die unless we do something. And once you get to that stage, what seems like a tough decision is really a simple decision, because we can't make it any worse. You know, all dead is all dead. It can't get any more negative than that. So we can only improve on the situation. And you know, at the risk of sounding a bit obtuse, but if they died during a rescue attempt, then at least it was going to be quick, and they would be asleep at the time if we'd once we'd made this decision that they were going to have an anesthetic for the extraction. So at least it would be an easy death for them, rather than staying in there and dying of starvation or exposure or infection or whatever it was that got them in the end. But having said that, it's still a little bit confronting when you go in, you know, on that first day, head into Chamber 9, and you see these kids that are still, you know, despite the ordeal that they've been through and that they're going through, they're still happy, healthy kids, and being teenage boys, they're acting like idiots and jumping around the place and all excited. And you think to yourself, by the end of the day, we might have turned 4 of these kids into corpses and be dragging them out of the cave in body bags, and that certainly doesn't sit all that comfortably with you. And the conversation that you're alluding to, that happened on the night before the first day of the rescue, about we spent quite some time talking about this. What would we do if the first, if we had 1 or 2 deaths straight up, and absent that this was due to some identifiable factor that we could deal with and just change our plan, but assuming that it was just a fundamentally flawed plan that couldn't be fixed, and a completely ridiculous endeavor in the first place, would we keep going? And we did have a difference of view on this, that Harry thought that he probably couldn't continue in that instance. Doctors have, I don't know what the degree of belief is, but they've got their Hippocratic oath, and you're not supposed to go around killing your patients. And I think he sort of morally or ethically at least struggled with that concept.
Yes.
But I took the view that, we could have a couple of deaths, even if we killed a lot of them. The situation hadn't changed. The basic formula was still there in place, and that we should continue and just do the best we could.
Amazingly, the rescue goes as the world knows that it went, and it just incredibly well relative to expectations and possibilities. And then what happens for you, amongst other things, is that I think, without really seeking it, unless I'm mistaken, fame comes your way, and I would say a deserving fame, and many around the world would certainly agree. But what was that experience like? I get the feeling that you weren't certainly chasing it. Perhaps you didn't savour it. I don't know. We'll hear in a moment. But Australian of the Year and various other decorations, and however deserving they may be, still, I guess, a big life transformation, and perhaps in its own way a difficult experience, because a new experience. How was the experience of fame, and what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, that was all a bit odd, really. We're just a few ordinary guys that were involved in this rescue, and then all of a sudden we're launched into this position of being some minor celebrities. And it all came pretty suddenly, because while the rescue was on, we had no idea that this was such a huge event around the world. We were pretty much head down doing the job that we were there to do. Certainly weren't watching TV or reading the newspapers, and getting a little bit of feedback from back at home, but that was, from people that would have been interested anyway. So we didn't know that, as it subsequently turned out, I've had people from countries all around the world saying that they were staying up all night watching TV and waiting for the next development. And then once the rescue was over, all of a sudden have to get used to reporters turning up at the front doorstep, and going to Canberra and hanging out at the Governor General's house and getting medals pinned on my chest and this sort of caper, which all sounded a bit ridiculous to me. But if that wasn't bad enough, then the Australian of the Year thing came along, and I often reflect that, if Harry and I were the best Australia has to offer for 2019, then this country does indeed have some problems. But it wasn't up to me, and so I just took it as it was intended. And I do realise that this is a very elevating thing for people. You can't deny that it's a bloody great story. In the truest Hollywood tradition, victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. And so people do really take something away from it, but it's still a bit hard to adapt. I can still remember that the first time I got recognized just walking down the street, and people sort of, behind their eyes saying, "Is that guy?" Um, it's it's odd, but look, I don't want to give the impression that it's a bad experience. It's not altogether um, unpleasant, and it's certainly, I don't want to seem small-minded, but it is a bit flattering when people are paying this attention to you, and that I'm sort of grateful in a way that, well, not in a way, I'm completely grateful that this happened to me at an older age. I've been around the traps a little bit, and I'm old enough and ugly enough to have developed a pretty cynical frame of mind. And you see this stuff, and I do manage to detach myself from it and see all of this going on. And I like to think anyway that I can take the good bits away from it and not be affected too much by the negative aspects of it. But I have a lot of sympathy for people that this might come to at a young age. If you're a teenager or 20 or something like that, and it turns out that you're pretty good at swinging a tennis racket or a guitar, and everybody's incessantly telling you how good you are, then it's pretty easy to start to believe that. And once you do, it's a pretty short step to just fall into this trap of thinking that you are better than everybody else. And it really is a trap. I mean, I use that word in a considered fashion. And it's almost a cliche to say that a lot of people that are famous, it's clearly not brought them happiness, and just negatively affected their lives, and they've ended up a complete disaster. So it's all going back a bit. I'm just trying to remember. Was it Andy Warhol that said about the 15 minutes of fame?
It was Andy Warhol with his 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep, you had a good deal more than that.
It's often taken out of context. Not the meaning that he meant, but I reckon it'd be a totally good thing if everybody had their 15 minutes. They get to experience this. Maybe 15 minutes isn't quite enough to recognize the negatives in the situation, but yeah, it's look, I'm certainly not complaining, and there's a lot of good that's come out of it. It's definitely broadened my horizons. I've got to meet people that I never would have met before, come across in my life, and I don't mean famous or successful people or anything like that, but just you walk into a room and you meet all these people, and I always like to think that everybody in that room knows something that I don't know, and if I can pick up even a fraction of that information, then I'm way ahead of where I was at the start. So I just try and grasp those opportunities. So yeah, I guess to return to your question, it doesn't really sit all that comfortably with me, but I'll take it for what it is and try and get something positive out of it. And I'm not regretful about the whole thing at all.
Yeah. That's a fantastic answer, and there's some great ideas there. Everyone in the room knows something that I don't know about, and I can pick something up from that. Then that will transform the experience, and ultimately will, of course, transform the person who has that attitude. So let's talk a little bit about the theme of our conference. I met you in a broadly Stoic context, and already many of your answers, I guess, have been what I would say pro-Stoic, para-Stoic, insert your prefix. When did you come across Stoicism? And yeah, is it something that has been a part of your life in any way, or can you just talk to me a little bit about maybe your history with Stoicism, and then I'll ask you about particular ideas that might
Yeah,
resonate
yeah.
with
So I was broadly aware of it, of the core concepts, but had no particular knowledge of it. I did do as one of my electives philosophy 101 when I was back at uni.
So take
But
us back. That would have been what, 80s, early 80s,
mid 80s,
mid
yeah,
80s.
yep.
And where
Um,
uni? Were you over in Western Australia?
at yeah, at Murdoch.
At Murdoch, okay. I have
Yeah,
a colleague and dear friend who's a philosopher at Murdoch. Yeah, yeah.
really. Okay, well, I was not
Probably
exposed apart
probably
from the
after your time.
probably after my time. Yeah. Look, I've got to admit that philosophy was not part of my core mission at that stage. My core mission was well divided between becoming a vet and drinking a lot of beer, I think.
So
And
very common.
so
That second one, at least, is quite a common university mission.
yes, yeah, yeah. Happily survived that. It'd be one of the more dangerous things I've done in my life. But yeah, so I don't know if I really came away with a lot from that, other than having heard of Stoicism at least, anyway, and maybe I had some broad idea of the core idea behind it. Um, but then, sometime over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, there's been this rise in popularity of Stoicism, and so start hearing more and more about it. And at some stage, it really gelled with me that I thought, look, this really reflects the core ideas that I've developed about life anyway. It's sat not in any formalized way. It's not like I'd sat down and developed any cogent personal philosophy or anything like that. But the way I treated life, it sat really well with that, and I thought that was worthy of some more investigation. And to me, I'm certainly not one of these people. There's this little branch of followers of Stoicism that almost treat it like a religion,
Mm.
and
Indeed,
some of
yes.
the classical Stoics, like prophets, and you've got to hang on every word that they've uttered. I don't treat it like that. To me, it's a set of tools in the toolbox that helps you get through life, and really is some guidance to how you should deal with situations. And it's not the only set of tools that I've got in my toolbox, but I've found it really good guide, when I don't know what to do or what my attitude should be, to just reflect on these core ideas. And I found it enormously helpful.
So let's talk a little bit about, if we can sort of drill into that idea of the toolboxes and the tools. I love the critique of a kind of religious attitude that you can find in the Stoic spaces. It's definitely there. And I'll just mention what you said about sort of finding Stoicism and realizing, oh, maybe these guys were sort of thinking as I've come to think. It reminds me of, there's a philosopher, Michel de Montaigne, who calls himself an accidental philosopher. He's a 16th century philosopher, and he basically said pretty much what you've said. When he started reading the Stoics and the Epicureans, he realized that he was kind of rediscovering what he'd come to independently. So he called himself an accidental philosopher, and maybe that's something that resonates a little bit.
Right. Well, I'll have to look a bit more into de Montaigne, because I agree. I mean, if you're talking about a philosophy of life, it's really just the sum of your attitudes and experiences, isn't it? It's neither more nor less than that.
Yep. And also your reflection on your experiences. And I mean, from what you said, there's been a curiosity that perhaps was born with you. I mean, who knows where these things come from, that has, obviously affected your interest in cave diving, which is it's a big part of what you said about discovering the new and so on. And perhaps everyone doesn't have that. Perhaps you can cultivate it, but the ability to have these experiences, and also to also, I guess, try and think about them and what they might mean, I think is philosophical, if anything is, right.
Um, yeah. So, if I had to, it's such a broad subject, and we could talk about this all day. But if I really had to summarize the most important part of it, I think it's, as you travel on this journey and you experience all these things that life's rich tapestry offers you, as the saying goes. Yeah, quite clearly there are things that you can change in life and things that you can't change. And the things that you can't change, it's a complete waste of time in devoting your resources and time to them. Just concentrate on the things that you can change and the things you can affect. Anything else other than that is futile, and you will not get done as much as you can get done. And that's all very nice sounding. And it would be good if life was as simple as that there was just one box here you can put in all the things that you can affect, and another box over here that you can't affect. And if life was as simple as that, then we'd all just run up a big spreadsheet and predict the future, and away we'd go. But there's doubt about these things. There's doubt at the time, and unless we've all got our crystal ball handy and can predict the future, then we don't know how things are going to turn out. So when deciding about what your course of action is going to be and which things you're going to affect, I think you've got to err very strongly in the direction of thinking that you can affect things. If you decide that you can't affect something and then it turns out later on that you could have done something about it, then that's a pretty grave place to find yourself in. If you put some effort into something that subsequently turns out to be beyond your control, that's not really as bad. And then that really leads me to the end point of that, which is the things as a result that you could have affected or have come about through your actions. Take responsibility for them. And the things that you can't affect, that are come about as a result of external influences, accept your fate. It's going to be what it's going to be. Learn the lessons from that and use them to make you a stronger person, a more capable person. Even when bad things happen and we're visited by these vicissitudes of life, it's still an opportunity. It's an experience, and you can get stronger out of this, and that will stand you well. And one thing that I find is a very productive line of reasoning is we're all going to be faced by tests in our life. Bad things or challenging things are going to happen to all of us. And not everybody's going to be involved in a cave rescue, but we're all going to have things like illness in ourselves or somebody close to us, or difficulties in our professional life, financial difficulties, or you think of those Ukrainians. I mean, they didn't ask for what's going on over there. It's just something that happened. And when these things come to us, then I like to view it as a test. Even if it seems like the whole situation's beyond your control, this is a test of your character and your resources. And you can, if you regard it as that, then all you can do is the best that you can do. And when you come out the other side of it, hopefully you come out the other side of it, then you can look back on your experience and the way you reacted. And even if it's not a good outcome, you can still say, look, I passed the test. I did the best that I could do, or I was found wanting. And when you're presented with the test, you can't train for it then. So it's behooving upon us all really to spend our lives preparing for this stuff and just make yourself the most capable and competent person, and arm yourself with the most resources that you can, so that when these things come along, you can do the best that you can do.
Yeah, I mean that's it's a wonderful summary in a way of you know, this pro stoic attitude that you've come to, or and maybe in part now shaped a little bit by the reading and the engagement that you have had. So, I mean, it's a good way to finish, but I'll just I just want to, if I can, revisit what it must have been like for you. Speaking of tests, you know, the tests that everyone knows about. You talk about this in the book, or Harry does. You know, you get back, and then there's a delay before everyone else gets back, and then everyone else does get back. The joy, I don't know, joy, relief, disbelief, suspended animation. Are you able to put into words that that incredible moment? Because I mean, certainly I remember I didn't stay up at night, but every morning on the radio I'd be listening and wondering and hoping and fearing, and there's a lot that's going wrong in the world, and then to have this story which was ultimately so positive was amazing, even vicariously from 8,000 miles away.
Oh yeah, totally. So yes, obviously there was a lot of rejoicing and merriment at that stage, and I'll probably take you back to a bit earlier than that. Really, at the end of the first day
Okay.
was single biggest moment for me, because we're in the cave. You know, on that first day, like we were completely accepting of the fact that we thought there were going to be casualties. I for one, I never thought there was a chance of getting all of these kids out alive. And I didn't. I mean, you know, people asked us at the time to put a figure on it, and we were sort of throwing around 50% casualties probably during the extraction, but that was totally made up. I mean, we didn't know. Just seems like a nice round number. And so on the first day, we're doing four boys on that first day, and I'm in at chamber 8, Harry's at chamber 9, and we're sending these boys down the line. And there's of course no comms from the outside world into the cave, so everybody in the outside, they didn't know what was happening from the time that we disappeared into the cave until when people started returning. And likewise, being on the inside of the cave, these boys would be disappearing. You know, each of them had one individual diver that would guide them out through this 3-hour journey. And once they disappeared under the water, I mean, for all I knew, they could have been drowning 10 meters down the line. I had no idea. And so it was only, well, once the fourth boy had gone and I started to swim out, and it took us a couple of hours to get out, even not carrying a boy out with us. And you know, my work for the day was done by that stage, so there's nothing really much to think about other than what's the result of it. We're going to get back and they're all dead. What's the reaction going to be? What sort of position are we going to be in? And I can very clearly remember at the end of that first day getting back to chamber 3, which was our dive base, and I stuck my head out of the water and took off my helmet and my mask, and there were some US Air Force paramedics there that had come down from Okinawa, and we'd got to know these guys fairly well. by that stage, and I asked them. The question I asked was, "Did anyone survive?"
Did anyone?
And
Okay. Wow.
yeah, and they said, "Yep, it's all okay. Everyone's alive, and they're waking up in hospital." And that was just like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders at that stage. You know, sort of make light about this stuff, but it did weigh heavily upon us. I mean, nobody really wants to be responsible for, even if it's not our fault, but to play a part in killing people. That's not really cool. So I think that was the most memorable single moment of the whole thing. And that was when I just allowed myself to think that maybe this crazy plan that we've developed can actually work, and that we're going to get some of these kids out alive out of here. And there was still a long way to go. Nine of these victims still in the cave, and 2 days to go. But at least we're in with a chance. And of course, as we know now, it subsequently turned out that our risk assessment was pretty weak, and it was a lot safer than we thought it was going to be. So we got away with it.
Craig, thank you so much for sharing your experience and some of the wisdom that you've drawn from it. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person and for your involvement in StyleCon down in Melbourne. But for the moment, I'm going to cut off the recording a sec. But yeah, look, thanks so much, mate. It's been terrific, and I'm sure people will get a lot out of it.
Good. I'd better start thinking about something to say at StoicCon, hadn't I? I work well under pressure. Most of my talks are written, if not the night before, then on the morning, and so we'll see. But